for all to see. The signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away. Like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day. The ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.
There he is. I'm Dr. Bruce Paix. Yeah, how about that? I don't know if someone's... who's posting on here? Oh, no, that's all right. That's just my new thing there. That's okay. That's all right. I've got it, because I've got my my page set up as public, and that there is just encouraging people to support me on that. That's okay. And we got Hikadua 225 likes the song, I believe. Well, thanks for your comment early on before we even kicked off, Bruce. It's good to see.
5 hours ago.
Was it 5 hours ago? Oh, there you go. It looks like 11 minutes ago. But anyway, been waiting that long? I don't think so. And you've been, well, we've just been talking about the cooler weather. It's still like it's summer tomorrow, first day of April and of summer, and not April Fools, but first day of summer tomorrow. And
summer today.
Weather? Well, summer today. Yeah, well, it is. That's right. Today, of course, it's the first. What am I thinking? Give myself an uppercut for that bloody comment.
You want to go out and come in again?
Yeah, I think I need to, mate.
Play the intro again, I think.
I think I need to, brother. That's what happens when you rush from like from your job to something else, and you lose track of yourself. But anyway, raining a lot in Hobart. Well, it's a bit like that in Adelaide as well there, Gail. So, welcome to our world. And I think Bruce was saying the same. Yeah, so there you go. So it looks like we got Rumble and Facebook working, which is good. We'll see for how long. I haven't seen anything come across from the X platform yet, but anyway, we'll see. They'll probably come in due course. And what do you got planned for us this week? You got a big one, mate? What's it look like?
Well, you ask me that every time, and every time it feels like it might just crest into 2 hours, and it's about that, I guess.
Okay, so that's all right. So we don't have to fluff it. I don't have to fluff it much today. You didn't have a rally event this weekend. You had a bit more time to work on the content.
No, I was at the dressage at Werribee for the last 3 days. So yeah, I had to do a bit of catching up.
Off with the GGs.
Yeah, well, I'm logistics and caravan manager for my event equestrian daughter.
Yeah. Okay. That keeps you busy, keeps you on your toes.
And there you go. Carla's fallen foul of the time. She's not realised the time difference and actually managed to get here on time.
Good to see you, Carla. So you're back in Bali. You had your visit here back in Adelaide, I believe. So good to see you back on and enjoying the poolside deck and drinks there, I guess, in Bali. Hopefully the weather, well, I think the weather is probably a lot nicer in Bali, isn't it, there, Carla?
I'm just looking up what the time is in Bali.
Yeah, we'll have to get ourselves up to speed, and the weather's probably a lot nicer than it is here, in the eastern states or in Adelaide, and from what we hear, Tassie and where you are in Victoria. So there you go. You found it?
No, it's not giving it to me.
Anyway, what do you reckon? We'll get on to it and then get my little bit out of the way, and then we can go on to yours. What is it? Perfect weather, and it's 2 p.m. apparently, Bruce. There you go.
Thanks for that.
3 hours behind there. Yep, there you go. So, Bruce, last week you spoke with people didn't watch episode 84 last week. What are we, 85 this week? 84. You talked about...
What do you mean? People didn't watch it.
Of course they did.
Who didn't watch it?
Who didn't watch it? So last week, episode 84, you had a little bit of a segment up where we were talking about Aboriginal like people identifying as Aboriginal. So how do we get people to properly acknowledge they're actually Aboriginal. But you kind of went into saying, well, you could identify as Aboriginal, and you thought, well, we could just go and tick the boxes on the forms that all these government forms and other agencies have there, and you could tick that you are Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, which you kind of you've done and you've indicated, because who's to say that you're not, right? So that's kind of may as well do that. Well, anyway, Bruce, to add on to that, we had an interesting thing come up in regards to some insurance agencies, and Ben Fordham actually covered this. I'm actually going to play you this little bit, and then we can talk into it in regards to your point about declaring yourself Aboriginal. So let me play this quickly for you. Let's see that.
May and Allianz will give you cheaper car insurance. We caught up with Ben earlier. He's the one who stumbled across the gender identity loophole while he was getting a few car insurance quotes. When he ticked the non-binary box, he saved hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, I was just going through doing some quotes the other night, and I'm looking in the process of purchasing a new car. And yeah, I found the box on there, and I thought I'm just going to give it a tick and see what it comes out with. It might be a bit of a joke. And yeah, well, a joke is right. I was absolutely stunned at what I found.
So from Ben's research, he found that at NRMA, the quote for comprehensive car insurance for a man came in at about $2,700. The quote for a non-binary person, with all the other details being the same, was about $1,900. So the car insurance quote is almost $800 cheaper for someone who says they're non-binary. And you don't need to prove your gender. You just tick a box and save. When Ben checked in with Allianz, it was a similar story. The quote for a man, about $2,800. The quote for non-binary, $2,300. So that's $500 cheaper. Here at 2GB Breakfast, we've run our own tests. We wanted to verify what Ben has told us. Liam Maguire from our team has followed the same process. He's got quotes from both NRMA and Allianz. He's entered the same details each time, the same kilometres, same address, same age, same driver history. The only difference was the gender he selected. At the NRMA, the quote for male came back 1,772. The quote for female, 1,490. The quote for non-binary, 1,239. So if Liam clicked non-binary, he'd save $533. The insurance companies usually decide these prices based on risk factors. So based on that, according to the NRMA, non-binary people are the safest drivers, followed by women and then men. Over at Allianz, the quote for male came back 2,069. The quote for a female and non-binary was the same, 1,718. So if Liam had have clicked non-binary, he'd save $350. Sienna Williams from the 2GB Breakfast team has tested the gender identity loophole too. At the NRMA, the quote for comprehensive car insurance for a female came back at $3,091. The quote for non-binary was $2,656. So if Sienna had clicked non-binary, she would save $435. Over at Allianz, the quote for female and non-binary was the same. We've contacted both insurance giants to ask them to please explain what's going on. Why do people who identify as non-binary get a discount? According to NRMA and Allianz, non-binary people are the safest drivers out there. They're safer on the roads compared to men and women.
There you go, Bruce. I thought I'd throw that one up there first for us. And I thought the first thing I was going to mention is, like, if you put that in context with what you talked about last week, if everybody now started ticking two boxes, so one would be Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander and the other one would be non-binary, so you could be a non-binary Aboriginal person, Torres Strait Islander, and you would actually get so many more benefits than anybody else. Whether you're a male or a female, you'd get the whole package. Bruce, is kind of what I was going to say in there. But I wanted to follow up because there was one caller that called in and said, if you did that and you had an accident and they actually, they could cancel your insurance if you actually weren't non-binary. But then Ben said, well, how do you prove that you're actually non-binary. So how could they, if you can basically identify as non-binary, they couldn't kick it back like that. And Carla's put in there, isn't this discrimination? Well, I'd say probably not. The biggest thing with all of this stuff is that you just stop frequenting these kind of organisations and go, well, you know what? If you're going to be looking at doing that, NRMA and Alliance, well, we just won't frequent you. What do you think about that, Bruce?
No, I'm going to change my insurance over to them because I'm going to start identifying as well. And I want to hit a couple of points there. So, Carla, isn't this discrimination? Another word for discrimination is freedom of choice. Okay. So, private individuals and private businesses should and must have the right to discriminate because that's what we do in life. Otherwise, I'd be forced to marry the first person I bumped into. I'd be forced to buy any old car at the car dealers. So, just walk in. Which car do you want? I don't know. Just assign me one. I'm not allowed to choose. So, in your private life, discrimination or exercising your preferences and your freedom of choice is essential. Where you get a problem with discrimination is where you don't have an option. So if governments discriminate, that's unfair because you can't go, well, okay, I'll just get a different government. So government agencies, etc., can't and must not be allowed to discriminate, and private individuals can and must be allowed to discriminate for that reason. I had a second thought here about this, and I think that NRMA and Alliance are going to actually trip up on this fairly quickly because transgender people are known to have very high suicide rates, and that's one reason why the military is not keen on, giving transgender people guns and letting them walk around with them. So if it's true that the suicide rates are much higher for transgender people, my experience in vehicle accidents is that a significant proportion of vehicle accidents are suicides. And pick a number out of there, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10%, because there are, a number of examples where people run at high speed into the only tree with no braking, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think they're actually, I don't believe their figures. I think they're pulling that out of somewhere, because I cannot see how transgender people could have a better crash rate given that factor alone. So I question it, but hey, they're private businesses. If they want to do that and you and I want to take our business to them on that basis, that's great. Shannon's insures my cars, and I've been very happy with them over the years because on the rare occasions where I've had to make a claim, they've been excellent. I might add, every time I've made a claim in decades, it's been clearly 100% not my fault. I've had somebody disobey a red light and hit me. I've had a piece of steel fall off a truck going the other way and hit me. And I've had a tree branch drop off a tree as I was driving and under it and me run over it. And in every case, the repairs got done with no trouble whatsoever. But, if they're not prepared to offer me the same discounted rate as a disabled Aboriginal transgender woman, hashtag so brave, then yeah, it's a private business. I'm a private customer. I'm going to look at other options as well.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, I just can't make this stuff up though, Ken. I was like, it's just bloody crazy. You just tick those boxes, mate. You just be a non-binary Aboriginal, Bruce, and you'll be right to go. So, I thought that might get a few things cracking. The other thing I wanted to cover today, I'm just going to go into one more thing before I get onto your stuff, is our friend. We were talking about our friend Ted Steele last week, and I had the privilege of catching up with Ted again during the week, and I wanted to share a quick clip because I did pose the question that was what got Elizabeth a little bit fired up in regards to exemptions and stuff like that when we were talking, and obviously we were talking about yourself and Mark Hobart and that giving exemptions, and you pretty much covered that you agree with Elizabeth on that anyway. But and we'll talk about the reasons to do that. But I put this to Ted, but he also elaborated on this and the whole lot of it further than just that. But I'm just going to play this quick clip from Ted Steele, and if people haven't seen it, you can jump onto my Substack and listen to the whole lot. But I'm just going to play you this little excerpt from our discussion. So where do you sit with doctors, like, with GPs, and you've kind of already talked into this a little bit, but with doctors thinking they need to give exemption, because we have this big discussion with Bruce and Elizabeth about, Bruce gave exemptions during COVID and Mark Hobart did, and Elizabeth is much stronger on this point. She's saying, well, why the heck should any doctor be give an exemption to someone? People shouldn't require an exemption. Do you feel the same about that?
I agree with that. I completely agree with that. Totally. But look, can we just reflect on doctors, and I won't give you the people who gave me this inside information on the education of doctors, but it more than rings true, because I trust this man, and you actually know him. He's a very trustworthy doctor. I asked the question point blank. During medical school in the late 80s or 90s, when this person would have been trained, did you have any lectures on the mucosal immune system in relation to conventional vaccination? And he says, to be honest, Ted, none. We never got any lectures. Then I asked more questions around the same theme. And you know what? I've come to the conclusion that the pharmaceutical industry totally corrupted all medical schools and literally prevented immunology knowledge being taught to young doctors, graduating doctors. So they had come out with literally no knowledge whatsoever. None. Not even rudimentary immunology 101 knowledge. Mm. So it's got the re-education has to go in medical schools. There has to be a course on the mucosal immune system, the systemic immune, just the sort of stuff we outlined in our second paper. Mucosal immune system, the systemic immune system, and the role of vaccination in medicine. Now, that would, if that was a full semester course, no doctor would come out from that expressing any ignorance about the dangers of vaccination. None. Not one single doctor would. But that's not going to happen, you see, because that would be counter to the medical professions shaping the landscape of the medical doctor. Because, every day they get bombarded with recommendations, take this drug, recommend this drug, all the day. Every day is coming into their inbox. They're getting the pharmaceutical industry's latest newsletter or latest recommendation for this medicine or that medicine. And vaccines are part of it. Mm. So it's not going to happen until we change the rules of how we educate our doctors. It's going to have to be that fundamental. It's going to be that ruthless. You're going to have a tyrant come in to each medical school and insist that there's an entire semester on the immune system, mucosal immunity, and systemic. Now, why do I say mucosal? Because 99% of all the pathogen infections we ever get come in by the mouth, the nose, and the eyes. That is, they confront a mucosal surface first. All the others, bites, stepping on nail, they're all peripheral, right? The great bulk of all insults that our body has to fight, from a young baby right through life, come in via the mouth, the nose, and the eyes. And the urogenital tract, in the sexually active group. And all those are mucosal surfaces. And you know what about the mucosal system? It's all interconnected. If you activate the mouth or the nose mucosal system, it alerts the gastrointestinal tract and the genitourinary tract. It's a totally new. It's not. All the experts know it's different. The mucosal immune system is a system in its own right, and it's quite different from the blood-borne system. They communicate, but they're different. You see why I keep harping on it? And the education of the medical profession of that knowledge, just knowing that, would be a revelation. They would then realise that all the common cold, flus, all the shots that they constantly said you have to give on an annual basis are ludicrous. They would realise straight away that they're totally useless and therefore not necessary. Forget about how dangerous they are. mRNA, that's another order again. But you see what I'm getting at? So I think the revolutionary change has to come of literal educational tyrants taking over each medical school and insisting that at least one semester on mucosal and systemic immunology is taught, so that you don't have any doctors coming out under any illusions that they weren't told.
So there you go. That was Professor Ted Steele, and I played that because I think you probably very much align with a lot of things that that Professor Ted would be talking about. We've talked about lots of things on our show over the 85 episodes, so I'm under no illusion that you wouldn't agree with a big bulk of what Professor Steele said there, Bruce.
I've corresponded with Ted a few times, and I wouldn't say I know him, but he probably knows of me. And look, I learnt a huge amount from listening to what Ted Steele had to say, and of course the other great Australian academic, Professor Rob Clancy. And he's right. I had never heard of the concept of two different immune compartments, the mucosal and the systemic, and the importance of it being that if you inject somebody in an arm with an antigen, a vaccine, and then expect them to produce antibodies against the other, they go to the other compartment, it doesn't work. The body knows where the insult came from, and it sends its defenses back to that front next time. So, at most, if vaccines actually could work for respiratory illnesses, you'd have to inhale them. Injecting them is not only dangerous, it bypasses your defenses and gives it into your body where normally it's sterile, but doesn't work anyway. So huge hat tip to Professor Ted Steele for alerting me to the fact, and he's right, I'd never heard of that before. And in fact, the only thing I remember about vaccines being taught in medical school is rote learning what the schedules were. You give this and this at 2, 4, and 6 months, 18 months, 5 years. I used to be able to rattle that off, but I don't think they taught us anything except what to give. Certainly none of the things that I've self-learned in the last few years. And it was interesting to hear Ted say that, he thinks that, medical schools were taken over. He's absolutely right. And the history of that goes back to, off the top of my head, late 1800s, early 1900s in America, where major pharmaceutical interests actually took over funding for the universities and stamped out 3 of the 4 schools of medicine and just left the MDs, the medical doctors. So if you look at doctors in America, go back 100, 120 years, there was 4 different sorts of doctors you could chase up if you had a problem. You could see an MD, that's a medical doctor. You could see an ND, that's a naturopathic doctor. You could see a DC, a doctor of chiropractic, or you could see a DO, a doctor of osteopathy. And the reason they were all split up into that is because they were all legitimate branches of medicine. If you want to see a doctor, you had a free choice. Who do you want to go and see? But of course, of all of those, the one that's most valuable to pharma is the MDs, because they're the ones who, print out all these drug orders. Naturopaths might tell you to take natural medicines, foods, or whatever. They're not going to tell you to take statins, for example. Same with chiropractors. They don't prescribe stuff as far as I know. And osteopathy is a bit different. So you can think of an osteopath as like a cross between a MD and a chiropractor. It's not really equivalent here in Australia. But the point he's making is correct. So the universities and medical schools were captured 100 years ago by Big Pharma, and they did it deliberately so as the only doctors that were legitimised going forward were the ones who would order their products. So he's quite right. That's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that you would have had something to say to that, because you obviously went through medical school and all that sort of stuff. So what's that? Philip's got a little note here saying Akkermansia probiotic plays a role in maintaining mucosal barrier integrity. I've never heard of that, but anyway.
No, I don't know that. I'm afraid I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
By the way, Ted Steele is going to get another run in the show here. So I saw you'd uploaded that thing on your Substack, and it's in my list of things to watch, and I might even do it tonight after the show. So, yeah, I saw that. I noticed it was part 3. So you've done a part 2 and a part 1 a fair while ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I first interviewed Ted for the first time 3 years ago, and then I interviewed him about a year ago, and then obviously just talking about new revelations and just some new things and that. So it's always great to catch up with Ted. I think our second one we did was we really got into the weeds with a lot of stuff about permaspermia, you know, the space debris, the falling into the atmosphere and carrying viruses in space debris and all that sort of stuff, and his theory around that. And we really unpacked that quite a bit more. So, yeah, it's always good to chat with Ted. So he's so passionate and lots of such a wealth of knowledge. So, yeah.
Yep. And I'll bring him up a bit later.
Sounds good. All right. Should we get onto your stuff then?
Onto the real stuff.
Onto the real stuff, my friend.
No worries. So where are we going this time? Okay. All right. So there's the contents list. So we start off as usual with not easy being green. And not only does Ted Still get a mention, you know, in the show, one of my favourites, but one of my other favourite Australian academics is Ian Plyman, and he gets a mention here as well. Great. Because volcanoes have sort of been in the news a bit lately, and a little story about undersea volcanoes injecting bubbles into the ocean, and want to raise the idea that, you know, that's a source of CO2 that for the large part we don't even know about. You know, a volcano going off 5 kilometres under the sea leaves no trace above it, but maybe releasing huge amounts of methane and CO2 directly into the ocean. And that's completely disregarded by all the climate models. That's not adequately factored in. And it can't be, because we have no idea. You know, the surface or the deep ocean bed, you know, many kilometres down, is more remote to us than the surface of the moon. In most cases, we have no idea what goes on down there. Funnily enough, there's a battery fire story, and I don't know if you've heard of that, but there is a battery fire risk with all of these EV batteries and tool batteries that are being pressed at us. And good old Bovair gets a bit of an update, because apparently they're ending trials in a number of European countries, possibly in result of the Danish safe and effective problem, where their cows are getting sick and dying when they're being mandated to have it. In the health section, a little bit about Ozempic, and it's apparently surfaced that Ozempic is a temporary fix. And I don't think the drug actually was Ozempic, but it's the generic class of that sort of melt my fat away drugs. Because apparently if you stop taking the drugs, most people put back on weight. And the pharma conclusion from this is, well, that's no problem. You just take it forever. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
We got a story about greedy insurers who want to use genetic data to penalise you for things like life and health insurance, and a government program to disallow that. And I'm going to discuss whether that's a good thing or not for the rest of us. Money and finance, more 10% real world inflation data. And did you see during the week, Albo has done a very kind thing for students. He's decided to forgive more student debt. Oh, sorry, I misquoted that. I crossed that out. It's not Albo that's going to forgive the student debt. It's the Aussie taxpayer that's going to forgive the student debt. And you and I are taxpayers. I don't remember getting asked if I wanted to be forgiving in regard to this. Do you remember that?
No, not at all. No, quite a few $1 billion worth that is too, Bruce. It works out to be quite a bit.
It's only OPM, isn't it?
Yeah, other people's money. Happy to throw it around, aren't you? When you've, yep.
We've got a couple of stories in the diversity is strength section. We've got a young Sikh paramedic student in Victoria has just won a discrimination case against Ambulance Victoria because he wanted to be a paramedic, but he ran foul of the fact that as a Sikh he was bearded, and this was a risk for mandatory masking in the health sector. So Ambulance Victoria denied him that. And he took him to court and won. So we're going to discuss that. And I've got mixed feelings about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll discuss that. And speaking of masking, Pauline Hanson created all sorts of bother in the Senate this week because she, for the second time, walked into the Senate wearing a full concealment burqa. This created uproar in the Senate, and she was labelled a racist and a misogynist and all sorts of things by the usual suspects.
Oh.
So we're going to have a look at that. The government overreach section, again, here in Victoria, the Labor government here is going to address the housing crisis by making it harder for people to be landlords. So she's introducing rules which favour tenants. So that will cause a number of landlords to say, I'm not doing this anymore. So that'll actually reduce the supply of housing. So it won't protect the tenants. It'll actually harm them in the long run. And to finish out, not quite a Mythbusters story, but another, are we allowed to call ourselves conspiracy theorist deep dive? And it was triggered by the fact that there was that massive high-rise fire in Hong Kong, which in fact involved, I think, 7 high-rise towers completely burnt out. And the funny thing is that none of those towers collapsed, which just made me think back to, I do remember fires collapsing high-rise buildings in the past. So I just had a bit of a look into, okay, what's the history of fire collapsing high-rise buildings, and why did the Hong Kong buildings not collapse, whereas, for example, World Trade Centers 1, 2 and 7 did? So I'm going to show you some interesting stuff on that.
Yeah, very interesting. That is. Very interesting. Yes, World Trade Center 7, hey? Oh, good on you, Carla. All the orderlies in Flinders Medical Center grew beards in the scandemic so they didn't have to wear masks. True story. Funny.
Yeah, unfortunately, they must have been vaxxed, otherwise they wouldn't have been allowed in the building. But I do remember walking around airports carrying a half-drunk cup of coffee for hours, again, as an interview to the people who wanted me to be masked, because you can't drink your coffee and be masked at the same time, can you?
One of those people that put little sippy cup holes in them. They, do you see those ones? Like they had the masks made up and
too soon with the sippy cup, Mark.
Yeah. Let's see that you've actually not drinking out of a proper vino glass there, mate. So you're onto the half sippy cup anyway. Trying to preserve your keep.
Still too painful, I'm afraid.
Yeah, $1,500. That's a bit of an ouch, isn't it? So yeah, there you go.
$2,000 actually, yes.
Yeah, $2,000. Yep, bugger.
Righto. So shall we start then? So what have we got here? This is the first story. So this story I regard as a massive case of not seeing the wood for the trees, because this story told us that CO2 bubbles had been observed arising from the seabed, apparently from a subsurface volcano, and they issued an urgent warning to us based on this. And the warning was that this showed us what would happen as the oceans absorbed CO2 from the atmosphere. So the reason I say it's a massive failure to see the wood for the trees. So what do you think those bubbles are that are bubbling up from the seabed, and where do you think they're coming from? So they're coming from deep in the earth, so they're of volcanic origin. And the dominant gases in those bubbles are going to be CO2 or methane, because that's what you get out of volcanoes. So I would have thought what this story does is it just shows us that, volcanoes can inject CO2 and methane, if you believe it's a problem, into the ocean directly, way down deep beneath the surface, and we don't even know. So they totally missed the point here, which is that volcanoes may well be a major CO2 contributor. And instead they said, well, just imagine what would happen if more CO2 got in from the atmosphere. Massive way to miss the point, guys. Massive way to miss the point.
Yes, what would happen, yes.
And if you look at the work of Professor Ian Plymer, another great Australian academic who's been severely chastised for failing to follow the approved narrative. And I've got a number of his books that I've read, and he's discussed this in the past. And it turns out that almost all of the world's active volcanoes are deep beneath the seafloor. You know, there's a few known on land, you know, some in Hawaii, some in Iceland, occasionally in Indonesia, Vesuvius. But, you know, they're the odd ones. But Ian Plimer says there are hundreds of thousands of subsurface volcanoes, and they might be kilometres down. So they can be injecting whatever volcanoes do, CO2, methane, lava, you name it, into the oceans, and we have no idea. Because, like I say, for the great majority of the deep ocean floor, it's never been explored. It's very difficult to go there, and we don't know. So Ian Plimer says this is a massive source of CO2. It's a natural emission, and the models either don't account for it at all or inadequately do it. And in fact, Plimer says that the volcanoes inject more CO2 into the oceans than human activity injects. So perhaps rather than cracking down on human activity, maybe we should be cracking down on volcanoes for all the good it would do us.
Yeah, well, we might have to get big excavators to dig up under the Antarctic, because I believe there's a whole heap of them under there too, which contributes to warming under there too. Same
story. So I thought, you know, well, that's a bit of a stretch, isn't it? And I thought I would just go to the AIs and just check whether Professor Plimer's views are valid or credible. So I did that. And I'm getting good at this since last week. So here's what I typed into the AIs. Are Ian Plimer's views on climate change valid? And the first thing that the AIs did is they started off with two false arguments. So they said, no, his views are not considered valid by the scientific community. So that first invalid argument there, that's what's called an appeal to authority. He's wrong because the experts don't agree with him. Okay, that's number one. And the second thing they did is they used a false argument called an appeal to consensus, where they said that his claims are widely rejected by the same authorities. So I didn't read any further, but isn't it interesting that the first 2 points that the AIs make about him to debunk him are two false arguments: an appeal to authority and an appeal to consensus. And again, hat tip to Stefan Molyneux's book, The Art of the Argument, that allows you to identify these false arguments. And false arguments that sound plausible are, by the way, there's a word for that, and that's called sophistry. It's where people use false arguments to make a point. So, yeah, AI might be wrong about a lot of things, but it's learnt how to use sophistry.
Yeah. So that's on Google search.
It was either Google or Brave. I can't remember which one it was. And I think Dr. Dan was saying last week that Grok was better. And look, it may be. My point here is that the AIs, in the few times that I've actually asked them a question that I already knew the answer to, they've been wrong on every occasion. And, you know, we went into that fairly extensively last week, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just put it into the chat GPT AI, the large language model, and it come back saying, bottom line, Ian Plimer's view on climate change are not supported by scientific evidence, the peer-reviewed literature, or the expert community. They are considered scientifically invalid by the vast majority of climate researchers. So, yep.
Those exact 2 points: appeal to authority and appeal to consensus.
Yep. 100%.
What it really needs to do is say he is scientifically wrong because that's how you. That's a valid argument. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now I'll leave it up to you and the viewers to draw their own conclusions, but that's a above sea level volcano. That's the Tonga eruption of 3 or 4 years ago. And it's just showing the massive amounts of material that can come out of a single volcano. Massive amounts. Imagine that happening dozens, hundreds, who knows how many times on the sea floor, and we have no idea. We just don't know about it. And that's injecting huge amounts of so-called greenhouse gases into the sea. The sea, of course, is in an equilibrium with the atmosphere. And in fact, the sea is a far stronger CO2 sink than the atmosphere is. And I think Ian Plimer has also argued that it's pretty much irrelevant what happens in the atmosphere because it equilibrates with the sea. And CO2, which is then enters the sea, then turns into various types of rock, precipitates out limestones and stuff. Don't quote me on the exact, but the sea pretty much absorbs and equilibrates anything in the atmosphere, and many, 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 many times.
Yeah.
Okay. And the models either don't account for it at all or inadequately account for it. So that's his point.
Yeah. It's all that whitewashing, isn't it? It's like, nothing to see here.
Yeah. And update on a recent story where we noted that Tesla was either recalling or remotely switching off a number of their house batteries because of fires. And the story this week says that another household battery manufacturer has had to do the same in Australia. And apparently that manufacturer is called Sign Energy or SIG Energy. And I haven't heard of them, but the story tells us that they are the largest or top-selling home battery in Australia, and that, again, fire risk has caused them to recall a significant number of their batteries.
Funny about that, isn't it? Who could have predicted that, Bruce?
Nobody could have predicted this, Mark. I was just thinking exactly that. And in more battery news from Adelaide, there was this story during the week where a garbage truck caught fire, or the garbage in the hopper at the back, such that the truck operator was forced to dump the load of garbage into the street because it was on fire. And I've seen this happen before, and that must be an SOP. If they get smoke or fire in the rubbish in the back, they literally can just tip the thing up and dump it all out in the street, and they do. I guess it's been a truck burning down as well. And so this was a story from Adelaide during the week where a fire spontaneously started in a rubbish truck. And the interesting bit there is that SAPOL, SA Police, said that they suspected it was caused by a battery being put in the rubbish.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time.
No, it wouldn't be, and we've heard of it before. And speaking of battery fires, here's another recycling centre fire from Sydney. And this was absolutely massive. This was a very large fire that had huge fire responses and dozens of hours extinguishing it. And I don't know about you nowadays, but every time I hear of a recycling centre fire, the first thing I think about is, okay, was that a battery? Are they recycling batteries there, amongst other things? Because there's been plenty of examples where that's true. We don't have a view on that yet, but hey, it's right on the heels of that garbage truck. Somebody's recycled their battery into the garbage. Yeah, maybe I wouldn't be at all surprised to see what the cause of this Sydney fire during the week was.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, when they go off, when they pop, don't they? It's like, the vehicles, the batteries, they're not easy to put out once they're going.
Yeah, well, they vent gases that burn. They vent explosive gases, yeah. All right, more safe and effective news from the Green Front. And in the past, we've discussed concerns about the concept of drugging cows with a feed additive called Bovir. And, a feed additive which changes the digestive system of a cow by poisoning certain enzymes is not a food additive. That's not a food. That's a drug or a poison. And the intent of that is to reduce the amount of methane that's being produced by cows. And cows produce methane as part of their digestion because millennia of evolution has told them that's a good idea. So we wanted to play God, come along and say, well, you might think you know how to ferment grass and get energy out of it, but we've got a better idea. So we're going to poison an enzyme in your digestive tract, and That's what Bovaer is. It's a poison.
Mm.
And Danish farmers have since been reporting hundreds of cases of died suddenly amongst their dairy cows because the Danish herd was mandated to take Bovaer.
Mm.
So you had no choice. And Denmark is a huge dairy country. They make a lot of dairy food. Okay.
Mm.
Well, things not going so well in other European countries because whilst Denmark hasn't lifted their mandate, there's been a whole lot of surrounding European countries have what they call suspended their trials. So that includes Sweden, Norway, and the UK. They've all said that their Bovaer trials have ended and they're not planning on continuing them. So you've got to wonder, is that because of consumer pushback? Consumer pushback's not going to work in Denmark, if they're all mandated. And as we discussed previously, you can identify where some sort of green initiative has been taken because it will form part of the advertising for the product.
Mm.
So if there was a certain dairy producer in Australia who was using Bovaer, they wouldn't, slap the Bovaer added label on it, but it would say something like carbon neutral milk or climate friendly milk or zero milk or something. So there'd be a way for you to tell without, reading, because it costs more to do this, and it's probably less productive because, like I say, millennia of evolution has told the cow the best way to turn grass into energy. And if we want to dick around with it, it's very unlikely we're going to improve on that. So for the manufacturer to get a return on this more expensive product, they've got to position it somehow so people can go, that's good, I want that, which of course is bad if people don't want it. So look for things like that as a way of identifying whether it's been modified. Now, this story was written by an author who's apparently been following the Bovaer story for a while, and he reproduced this hazardous chemical label for Bovaer because he said, any chemical's got to have a HazChem, a list of what's in it, what are the hazards, how do you deal with them. We have the same thing in fires, trucks with chemicals on them have got UN placards on them which tell you how to fight the fire. Well, same for any sort of chemical. There's a hazardous materials docket or document that will tell you what are the risks of it and how to deal with it. And he's reproduced that and notes that Bovaer has a warning about acute oral toxicity. In other words, you shouldn't eat it. And also it's suspected of damaging fertility of the unborn child. So these are known warnings for this chemical poison Bovaer. So hardly surprising if cows are dropping dead. If it's a risk if taken orally, because that's how they're getting into them. And you also got to wonder about things like fertility and productivity. It's there in the hazardous materials label.
Yeah, all these things that they claim, it's for the greater good, it's good stuff, it's all this, and it's additional cost to farmers and everything. It's all part of a much bigger bloody agenda, like where all this is coming through. It's just everything's working against our health or against food or against farming. It's just a massive attack on every front, isn't it, Bruce?
It's against nature, is what it is.
Yeah, 100%.
And
the enemy in full flight.
Karen, Cows with Guns was Dana Stewart, I think. Cows with Guns.
Yeah, that's it. There's something that amazing. That's the way. It was a funny one too. Cows with Guns. I got that in my head now too.
And be aware of chickens in choppers. Apparently, that was the last stanza. And Karen, no, it's not Karen. Gail. I think the take-up of Bovaer in Australia has been pretty modest. I'm not aware of it, and I've certainly asked here and there and been told no, but I don't know the answer. But like I say, it's likely that it would be promoted as a good thing. It'd be used as a selling point. So if the milk is just labelled like any other milk and it doesn't say zero, earth-saving milk or something, it's quite likely it's not in it. That'd be my take on it.
Yep. Yep, and you're right, Gail. There's the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, all that's part of it. The Bank of International Settlement, the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, name them all, it's all part of it, all by design. Yep, you got that right.
I think you mean the unsustainable development goals, don't you?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? That's the point. We're way too many people at 7 billion or nearly 8 billion people now. There's too many. And it's working against their narrative. It's all for nature, don't you know? It's about saving the planet. We've got to have less humans.
Now, on that topic, how do we know how many humans are on the planet?
Well,
how do we know?
That's a good question.
We assume they're telling us the truth about that.
Yeah,
well, they don't have they don't have a good history of truth with any numbers, do they?
No, they don't really. No. Well, it could be anything they're feeding us. Got to watch that world clock. Got to watch the number keep going up. It's like the debt. It's like the debt clock.
The debt clock. Now, I believe the debt clock. But yes, there we go. All right. So onto the health section. And previously, we talked about the concept of using a drug to manage a foodborne illness, obesity. Obesity is a foodborne illness. So straight away, if you want to deal with a foodborne illness at the source, you deal with the food. We didn't cure diarrheal diseases by putting everybody on antibiotics all the time. We made the water clean. Now, same. We have a massive problem in the Western world with obesity. Obesity is a foodborne illness. And rather than address that, and in fact, usually the modern food environment just gets worse and worse all the time. Big Pharma's been very happy to come out with drug solutions. In this case, it's Mounjaro, but Ozempic, you name it. We can all think of the examples. And I think the obesity drugs are going to be one of the great medical disasters because they have huge side effects, which are slowly coming to light, probably because they can't be suppressed anymore. And some of them are severe and even life-threatening. So there's blindness has come out of it. There's been gastroparesis where your stomach stops working forever. So you vomit all the time. There's been a whole host of side effects. And you're just adding a drug to a disease that you're not curing. So indeed, another problem, of course, is because you're not addressing the root cause here, that even if the drug does work, you're stuck on it forever. And this study showed that most patients put on at least some of the weight that they'd lost if they stopped taking the drugs. So most patients put at least some of the weight back on. So what did the pharma industry conclude out of this? Well, they said, well, that's not a problem. It just shows the need for continuing obesity treatment. You just need to keep taking the drug. And I might add that the researchers in this study included employees of Eli Lilly. Well, not that they'd be biased, of course.
No, of course not.
And I thought this was interesting. A bit later in the article, it said, well, they argued that it was helpful to compare the anti-obesity drugs to other chronic disease drugs like antihypertensive drugs. So, if you've got high blood pressure and you take a drug, you don't stop it when your blood pressure goes down because your blood pressure will rebound back up again. But what they've inadvertently done there is they've actually made my point, which is you can't cure a foodborne disease with a drug. Because I believe in most cases, high blood pressure is probably a foodborne disease as well. So I think it's my opinion that most cases of high blood pressure are caused by carbohydrates, causing inflammation of your vessels, and seed oils, inflammatory foods as well, which makes the pipes stiffer. So instead of your arteries being nice and elastic, with each pump of the heart, they expand and contract, if they get stiffer, then you get blood pressure spikes up, and that then leads to all the problems you get with vascular disease. those stiffer pipes can break. You can get a bleed, you can get a stroke. They can get damage on the inside and clog up. Again, you get a stroke, you can get a heart attack. So I think they've actually done an own goal here, because they've basically admitted that blood pressure medications aren't the right way to go either for treating chronic high blood pressure. And again, when I was a trainee doctor, or a medical student, I never heard anything about curing high blood pressure. All we were told that is most cases were what they called idiopathic. Idiopathic means we don't know what causes it. We needed to look for the rare cases where there was a cause, and they listed things like tumours of the kidneys, which were pumping out adrenaline, which will pump your blood pressure up, etc. But they said, but in most cases, it's idiopathic. We don't know what causes it. So all you can do is take your blood pressure drugs forever. Well, I can tell you in my case, I was on high blood pressure drugs for at least 20 years. And when I went carnivore, so when I stopped eating inflammatory carbohydrates and seed oils, I started blacking out when I stood up quickly, and that was because my high blood pressure had gone away. So reinforcing what I said, which is I think in many cases, if not most cases, high blood pressure is caused by inflammatory foods making your vessels stiff. And certainly in my case, when I stopped inflaming my arteries by eating carbohydrates and seed oils, my chronic high blood pressure, which I've been taking pills for 20 years, went away.
Wow.
Why was I never taught about that in medical school?
Well, there's a reason. We know the answer to that, Bruce. It's exactly what Ted was talking about.
Almost like the drug companies had taken over medical education, Ted.
Funny about that.
Almost like.
Exactly. I don't know if Trish is having a go at you having a drink of your vino, but alcohol raises blood pressure. And not when you spill it on your keyboard or you waste it like that, Bruce.
No, I had very high blood pressure after spilling it on my keyboard, Mark. So
yeah.
Trish is spot on there.
Yeah, when you spill it, that definitely comes up.
And Gail is talking about, type 2 diabetes can't be cured. And we were taught the same thing in med school. If they mention diet at all, said, look, you can try diet, but no patient ever sticks to it. And the problem with that is the diet that they tell you to take is still full of carbohydrates. They tell you to take low GI grains and vegetables and all that. No doctor's ever tell them to eat steak. Tell them to eat fatty, salty steak. And by the way, you would be horrified the amount of salt I pour on all the meat that I eat. And isn't that supposed to be a cause? You've got to cut your salt down?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But yes, I consume huge amounts of salt and I don't have high blood pressure. In fact, I cured my high blood pressure when I switched over to that.
Yep. Well, I've got a personal story of that too, Bruce, and we had talked about it when you had your segment about the carnivore diet and that. I went on it because I was eating a lot of carbs, a lot of inflammation, and actually I remember telling the story about how my eyesight actually improved when I went on. I thought it was about a month or 2 months that I'd gone on a bit of a carny diet. Went back to my optometrist and my eyesight had actually improved. So, that was my testimony. And sometimes, fall off the wagon and you go for it, and working from home and being close to the pantry and doesn't help. But, I try to keep back on track because I can see the difference when I'm consuming carbs or even sugar, your chocolates and stuff, because I've got a sweet tooth. I flare up, and when I become a bit more disciplined again, all that improves. So that's just my personal personal story, testament.
I'd check with your doctor before I did anything like that, Mark.
No, of course, Bruce, absolutely. We're definitely not giving medical advice here, people. So just to get that off the table there now.
Righto. So what's next in health? Okay, interesting story for discussion here. So the conversation, which I think is like the ABC website, had this feel-good story recently. And it seems that those nasty life insurers won't be able to discriminate against you based on your genes in the future.
Okay.
Okay. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because what insurers do is they take on your risk for a fee.
Mm-hmm.
So your risk of something bad happening, they put a dollar value on it. And if you pay them that dollar value, if the bad thing happens, they'll cover it. If you crash your car, if your house burns down, and if you die, health, etc. So a key part of that, in my opinion, has to be, okay, well, if they're going to price my risk, they need to know what my risk is. And if they don't know what my risk is, they're going to have to build in a margin in case they get it wrong. And or they're going to have to make sure that the risk across the entire pool covers it. So the average risk.
Mm-hmm.
Average risk. So I don't think it's a good idea to prevent insurers from using any tool that they have to accurately assess your risk.
Mm.
And I think the equivalent to this story, I just changed a couple of words here, would be this story. Motor insurers won't be able to discriminate against you based upon your alcoholism and multiple crash history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. See how that works?
See how that works? So it's not discrimination, it's choice. And they get to choose the price that they put on, assuming your risk. So it's a good thing. And I don't want the inability to assess my risk to mean that I have to pay more. And I get this already. I'm a bloody good driver. I don't drink drive. I don't speed, etc., etc., etc. I've had advanced driving training. I've driven cars at speed and crashed some. But the point is, I'm not the alcoholic with no license who writes a car off every 2 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want my insurance premium to be rolled into that person's.
Yep.
And we discussed a few shows back what's called the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule. And the Pareto principle applies broadly across society, but it basically says that 80% of the results come from 20% of the inputs. And that's true for results that are good or bad. So, 80% of the profit in a company comes from 20% of the employees. But conversely, 80% of the cost to a car insurer comes from 20% of the drivers. So assuming I'm not one of those drivers, I don't want my risk to be pooled in with theirs. And same with life insurance. If my life insurance risk is low, and it should be, because I'm not an idiot, I don't drink and drive, etc., etc., etc. I eat healthy, I don't have high blood pressure, I'm not obese, you name it. If my insurer could add to that with a genetic screen that says, okay, well, I don't see evidence that this, or this is going to come up. If that allows them to drop my premium, that's great. I'd like that to happen, because if we don't allow them to use that information, then my risk's going to be pooled off with people who are higher risk. So whilst the conversation painted this story as a feel-good thing, discrimination, well, no, discrimination's bad, right? And the nasty life insurers won't be able to discriminate against people who just might die a lot. That's going to be banned. Well, assuming I'm not one of those people, then that's not in my favour. And if I am one of those people, maybe it's worth knowing. Maybe I'll make other changes. So, no, it's not discrimination to accurately judge risk. No,
I mean, that's what they're in the business for. And at the end of the day, that's right. So they've got to, absolutely. If you conduct risky behavior, you're a skydiver or you, whatever it is, any of those risky kind of things, your premium should probably be higher.
Should be higher. Otherwise, somebody else is paying. It's OPM. And
that's right.
We saw this in medicine. If a patient was scheduled for an operation, the anaesthetist, whose job is to stop the surgeon killing the patient during the operation, they would have a careful look at the patient. What is their health history? What's the state of their heart? What meds are they on? Are they diabetic? Are they obese? And sometimes we would actually say, hey, this is a high-risk case. Or we might say to the patient, or we might say to the surgeon, this is a high-risk case. Do you really think we should be doing this? It's part of the process, by the way. I've got to say to the patient, well, here's what they want to do. Here's all the things that could go wrong, and here's my assessment as to how likely it is. And of course, surgeons have no idea. All they want is the patient to be still so they can start cutting. But it's my job to actually tell the surgeon and the patient if I think the risk is high. And maybe I'll deal with that by going, look, I think the risk is high, so we're going to change things in these ways. I'm going to book you into intensive care afterwards. I'm going to make some improvements at the start. Maybe you can lose some weight. Maybe put a pacemaker in, etc. So the adequate assessment of risk is vital for safety in medicine. And people aren't, saying, oh, well, you're discriminating. You won't do the operation just because I might die. No, it's actually my job to tell you might die, and maybe you want to think about whether you really want to have it.
Yeah.
So that was my take on this, terrible discrimination story.
I wonder if it'll end up getting to that stage, like when more and more evidence comes out about the last 5 years that, insurance companies have already got data and records there, Bruce, about the increase in mortality over the last 5 years for all age groups, even younger ones, and that's skyrocketing, that they'll actually say that certain people that took something, their premiums have to go higher because they've had some novel thing injected into them multiple times. I'm just wondering if it'll get to that stage.
No, of course not, because where things are government programs, they suppress this sort of information and force the communalisation of risk. Think Medicare. Everybody gets Medicare coverage, even the people who drink and smoke and weigh 250 kilos, etc., etc., etc. They're covered. It's a pooled risk because that's a government program. We'll see the same thing with EVs and insurance for fires. Instead of the car insurers being able to say, ooh, you got an EV there you want to insure, that'll be $12,000 as your premium because those things catch fire all the time. Because this is a government program, they'll introduce a law, what they call community rating. It will be illegal to discriminate against EVs because the government's in favour of that. Nothing can get in the way of that program. So, yeah, and same COVID. The COVID injections was our government program. So not only do they never want any information to leak out that there might have been problems with it, but they'll just suppress them. They make it illegal. Even if you heard about it, no, well, that's discrimination. You can't do that. It's community rated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just before you move back into your money and finance, I just wanted to just quickly get back to a comment from endeavouring to preserve. As a Canadian, yes, we're absolutely under attack here in Australia in regards to the stolen land and UNDRIP. I actually, back during the Voice debate, I got it on my Rumble page on South Australian Focus. I actually unpacked UNDRIP in quite a bit of detail in there if you wanted to jump on there and just check that out. But we're definitely under attack here. But the other thing I've also just written here in my own state, here in South Australia, we're going for the Uluru Statement and we're talking about treaty and other things. And I've just written about that on my Substack. So yes, it's in full swing here in Australia as well in regards to living on stolen land and treaties and all that sort of stuff. So yep, it seems to be all the countries, all the colonized nations that are kind of under this attack from this United Nations kind of framework where it's all stemmed from. So this is not organic and it's been driven by an agenda.
Yep, and it's a business opportunity. You look at any Indigenous group around the Western world that's still living a largely traditional life. Doesn't matter how much money they get thrown at them and how many apologies, whether they're Inuit, whether they're American Indians on reservations, whether they're traditionally living Aborigines in the Northern Territory, they benefit not one jot from the billions that are thrown at them. It all gets skimmed away by the grievance industry bureaucracy before it gets to where it might be needed. And that's what they want. Can you imagine what would happen? Let's say they introduced a program in Canada where the Inuit suddenly had all their problems went away. They had a successful program. So alcoholism, the diabetes, obesity, the squalor, all that. Imagine they actually cured that with a program. That's a disaster for the bureaucrats who are farming those people to skim off all the money on the way. That business goes away. So of course it can never work.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Yep.
Alrighty. Speaking of money,
Yep. Skimming.
the dominant change during the week was silver. And I've come and gone from silver a few times in recent shows and said that I think silver is due for a massive run-up based on history, based on the gold-silver ratio, based on long-standing price suppression, and based on booming industrial demand for solar, EVs, missiles, etc., etc. And again, silver's had an absolute tear in the last week, going up over 12%, which is amazing. Gold's gone up a bit, and Bitcoin went up a little bit as well. I think today it's dropped off a bit. Although, like I said previously, I remember when Bitcoin and gold coin cost the same thing, $1,600. So if Bitcoin sags back a bit and still above 100,000, I'm not going to panic just at this stage.
Yep. No, because it exploded from when you first got it. That's for sure. Yeah, you don't want to be a nervous investor when you're in Bitcoin.
No, it's got to be a long-term thing, and unfortunately, the Bitcoin that I did buy a long time ago, I lost in a boating accident, machete fire. So I don't have any anymore, which is a real shame. But I'm just talking historically there.
Yeah, that's right. No, fair enough. Fair call.
All righties. And last week we talked about Walter Wriston and Wriston's law. And the basic translation of Wriston's law is money goes where it's treated best. And example of this from Britain this week, because Britain, like Australia and all failing extractive Western economies, they're just trying to screw any sort of productive wealth out of whoever's got it. So taxes are going up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly the new budget brought down by the Chancellor in the UK includes tax rises. And one of the things they want to do is, as ever, soak the rich. Now, it's a side issue, but if you actually believe that you can just take the wealth of the rich and use it to solve all your problems, you can't. There's not enough. There's nowhere near enough. And of course, the rich aren't sitting there with $1 billion in the bank. The rich are sitting there with $1 billion worth of assets that are working. So they're running factories, et cetera, et cetera. So if you take their money off them, those businesses go away. And all the people employed in those businesses lose it. So the whole thing that you can tax the rich to pay for profligacy is garbage. It never works, never will. But here's the example of it. So the UK is talking about increasing taxes on the rich, including increasing their inheritance taxes. Now, if and when I die, if my assets are to be distributed to my children, that's what I want. That's the reason why I haven't, spent them all on jet skis already. It's because I want something to be passed on. And yet your business partner, the government, will step in there and say, oh, even though you paid taxes when you bought that, you paid taxes out of your income to buy the asset, we've taxed you as you went along. Maybe we've in capital gains taxed you, as they're talking about. But now that you're dead, we're going to tax you for that as well. So surprise, surprise, according to Riston's law, money doesn't like being stolen all the time. And so people with money, if you steal too much of their money, they will move.
Mm-hmm.
If you're living in a bad neighbourhood and you get mugged all the time, you will move. Well, here's an example of Riston's law. So we got one of the UK's richest men, Lakshmi Mittal, who's a billionaire, and he's moving. He's moving to Switzerland, and he cites the reason as being the coming inheritance tax and the expectations of more. So that's a beautiful example of Riston's law. Money will move if you treat it badly.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. Yep, and I think they're trying to tighten, and Gail mentioned about trusts, but I think they're looking at ways to hit the trusts a little bit harder as well for that. And
we got the, okay. The only reason why the historical gold-silver ratio is not relevant, well, historically, it's always been relevant, such that, and for people who don't know, the gold-silver ratio is the relative price of an ounce of gold to an ounce of silver. And historically, it's usually somewhere around the 30. So you need 30 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold. And where it blows out above that, it tends to come back down to that over time. And in fact, the gold-silver ratio has been nudging 100 lately, might have come down a bit with the run-up of silver. So it's well above where it's been for centuries. And so anytime you've got a major separation or a divergence from the mean, then mathematically it tends to come back to the mean. So it's likely that just based on that, if the gold-silver ratio drops from 100 down to 30, that means that the relative price of silver's going to do 3 times as well as gold, and gold's already on a tear. So, yep, I think the gold-silver ratio is still relevant. Gail's asking about Bitcoin ATMs. I'm not sure how they work. I haven't used them, but you would have to have some sort of wallet device. So you put your money in the ATM and that will transfer Bitcoin to your account, basically. Not great. Yeah, not great. That's all I'd say about that.
We'll bring this one back up again. Where's your little? There it is.
It's all right. So, okay. We got another one for the real inflation is 10% files. And this story is about real estate, and it's telling us what price movements we're going to see in the next 12 months. And look at the numbers. So Perth house prices are forecast to go up between 12 and 16%. Adelaide prices between 10 and 14%. And Brisbane prices between 10 and 15%. So once again, there's a whole lot of price rise data relating to a very large purchase, and they're all more than 10%. In contrast to what the government tells us the inflation rate, which is 2 to 3%. It's a trick question.
3.8, wasn't it? Didn't it just pump in at 3.8?
Yeah,
Massive,
yep,
right. Well, not massive, but they're still massively underinflated from what the actual numbers are, and we've gone through that ad nauseum in our shows.
So the only thing that's low inflation is the inflation rate estimate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. Yep.
And it's a trick question, but okay, I've asked you this before. What's the most expensive thing you buy in your life?
Government.
Yes.
I've learned something from you, Bruce. After 85 episodes, I'm finally learning.
The second most expensive is probably housing. So if your second most expensive cost is going up more than 10% in a year, then there's got to be a whole lot of stuff in the negative for you to get anywhere near what the government claims, which is 3.8%, which is garbage. Not that.
Yeah. Yep. And you've proven that many times over in our episodes.
Many times. But the government just keeps on telling us that the inflation rate they're targeting is 2 to 3%. And like I said, maybe it snuck up between 3 and 4% last time. And this story totally misses the point, because this this story says that wages are now barely growing faster than inflation. But they're saying that inflation is less than 4% because they're saying, you know, oh, you'd be lucky to get a 4% pay rise. So you're going to barely get anything more than inflation, probably more than your 3.8%. No, if you're getting a 4% pay rise and your inflation rate is 10%, you're going backwards. And by the way, we've all been going backwards since the 70s.
Yep.
This is why we've gone from, you know, a plumber with a wife who stayed at home and 4 kids could get a new Kingswood every 2 years and have a house, to now where both parents have to work. They've got to stash their 1.3 kids in childcare so both of them can go out to work and maybe pick up side hustles on the weekend. And then they've got to save up for 20 years to get a house deposit on a house that they'll probably never pay off in their entire life. Our living standards now are worse than they were in the 70s, hidden by the fact that everybody's carrying huge amounts of debt because they're buying a lifestyle that they can't afford and haven't paid for. That's the difference.
Just cut out there for a sec, I think. But anyway, I'm back now, I think. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I didn't even hear you drop.
But it's funny that you mentioned my family. I didn't know I'd spoken to you about that. You know, plumber. I've got, you know, there's 4 boys at home. 4 boys at home. My mum was a proud house domestic engineer, and me and my brothers were all at home, and Dad was a plumber. So there you go. And we did all right.
Yep, would have been much better if the kids could have got dumped in state education and Mum could have gone off to work, of course.
Of course. Well, just the way they want it, don't they? Just the way the commies want it.
You wouldn't be having all these troublesome ideas now, would you?
No, that's right. How dare I be a rebel? Think for myself, being a critical thinker, Bruce. How dare I?
All right, final finance story for the week. So Albo has kindly said that he's going to cancel the debts of 100,000 students, and that's going to be equal to billions of dollars of taxpayer money going west. Now, it sounds very simple on paper, doesn't it? So Albo's just going to cut the debt. What it really means is that taxpayers, who are actually the source of that money, have just been stiffed for it. So Albo's not the one who lent the money. The taxpayer's the one who lent the money. And Albo's now said, well, I'm just going to forgive that on the taxpayer's behalf. So that's not a forgive debt thing. That's a default. So you and I got stiffed for the money by the people who have these loans for their worthless sociology degrees. Like so many government investments, all they are is wealth transfers and the taxpayer gets stiffed again.
Yep.
That's what that's about.
Yep, as always, that's exactly right. OPM, it's easy when you can throw around other people's money, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, which is why they don't want you and I learning about how to hide our money in things that the government can't help themselves to.
Yes, and I think the biggest problem for us with that, though, is that continual Labor government is that they're buying votes with that, aren't they? So, you know, here we go. We're going to give you free money. You're going to cut your debt. So then when the next election comes around, we've got our captured voters, because you'll remember that.
Yep. And of course, Liberals no different.
No, 100%. Absolutely. No different at all. Legacy parties, that's all right.
Yeah.
Addicted to spending other people's money.
Can't remember which famous economist said it, but he basically said elections are just auctions on stolen goods.
Yeah.
That's what elections are.
Well, he's right. He's made a bloody good point.
It might have been Thomas Sowell. I can't remember. Elections are just auctions of stolen goods.
Sounds like a Sowell kind of quote, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? All right. The diversity divide section. Now, during the week, there was uproar in the Parliament because Pauline Hanson tried to introduce a private members' bill which would ban the use of the burqa in public spaces. And she was denied the right to table that bill. And so she went out and put the burqa on and came back in. And this created uproar. So let's take a little look at that, shall we?
You got it.
Can you drop a screen?
Yeah.
So I've got one.
Is that the one?
I think that is the one. Let's
Lee Harris, yep. No. Oh, yep.
Yeah, that's the one. Whoop. Oh, can you add him back for me? I've just dropped him out. There we go.
There you go. Yep. Oh, you got him.
Let's play. That was Andrew Bolt. Yes.
One Nation leader Pauline Hanson went into the Senate today dressed in a burqa after she'd been refused permission to introduce a bill to ban the burqa from public spaces. Now, Hanson was abused by several senators and not allowed to defend herself, while Muslim Senator Fatima Payman could freely wear her hijab. Hanson wasn't even allowed to speak in her defence before the Senate was suspended after she refused to leave, although others were given a free shot at her.
But racism should not be the choice of the Senate. This is a racist senator displaying blatant racism and Islamophobia, President.
If this is about the dress code, she is disrespecting a faith. She is disrespecting the Muslims out there, Muslim Australians. It's absolutely unconstitutional. This needs to be dealt with immediately before we proceed.
Clearly, what has happened today is not a genuine demonstration of faith. In fact, it is the middle finger to people of faith. It is extremely racist and unsafe.
Senator Hanson, all of us in this place have a great privilege in coming into this chamber, a great privilege. And we represent in our states people of every faith,
Even the Liberal leader in the Senate, another woman, attacked Hanson. So much for free speech and democracy. But Hanson, on her way out, did give a little speech to members of the public who've been watching on, explaining what she was doing and why. They, at least, very interesting, gave her a round of applause and called out, "Good on you, Pauline." And now Pauline Hanson will explain herself to you. Pauline Hanson, thank you so much for joining me. Why wear the burqa in the Senate? Now, you did it 8 years ago and did cause outrage among some, so why do it again?
Yeah. Andrew, today I moved on the floor of Parliament. As a senator, I have a right to move a private member's bill, and that bill was under the Criminal Code amendment to prohibit the burqa or full face coverings in public places. Now, I wanted to introduce that bill. My concern is, as a nation, for national security, terrorist threats and attacks that are happening, also for women's rights, that they're not forced to wear the full burqa against their will. And it's, I think it goes against our culture and our way of life. And this is why I wanted to introduce the bill. Now, I just started to introduce the bill, and it took one voice, Andrew. There was a couple actually said no, denied me the right. So straight away they denied me the right to ban the burqa. So I actually left the chamber, went up and I put the burqa on. And I thought, well, if you won't ban the burqa, then I'm going to wear it. Well, didn't that upset them? They didn't want me to wear the burqa in Parliament. They don't want to ban it, but they don't want me to wear it in Parliament. So what do they want? They're a bunch of hypocrites.
Absolutely right. And wasn't that beautiful? And again, for students of the art of the argument, here are some of the things that she was criticised of. So Fatima Payman, the Pakistani origin senator, said that she was a racist. Well, it's a straw man.
Yep.
So she's raising a false argument. The burqa is not a racial garment. If anything, it's a religious garment. Okay. And at no point did she do anything except wear it. Perhaps she's celebrating it. So Senator Payman used the racism straw man.
Yep. It's a religion, not a race.
The next one threw the offence card at her. I'm offended. You are disrespecting it. That was the second argument. Who cares? You're allowed to be offended. I'm allowed to offend you. That's what free speech is about. She was also accused of being not genuine. So she couldn't wear that because it wasn't a genuine demonstration of faith. faith is a belief. Who's to say whether it's genuine? And also, who says that faith gives you any sort of legitimacy in this? Why does she have to be? You know, if someone else can wear that, why can't she?
Mm.
Surely you don't want to discriminate on the basis of religion. That would be terrible, wouldn't it? And then finally, I think it was Penny Wong threw in the "I feel unsafe" card. It is unsafe what you're doing. Not sure how that works. So there are a whole lot of straw men, ad hominems, and false arguments used there again. And Pauline very rightly pointed out, well, I wanted a bill so we could discuss banning it. You refused it, so I wore it. I'm not allowed to ban it, and yet you want to ban me from wearing it. So beautiful. And do we all remember the schizophrenia about masking? So prior to COVID, you couldn't wear a face covering into a bank. You know, there were signs saying you have to take your motorcycle helmet off in a bank. If you went in wearing a ski mask, so your identity was hidden in a bank or perhaps any other place where security mattered, that would immediately raise alarms and was banned in some cases. Then we had COVID where it flipped over to you have to hide your face. And then after a while, it flipped back again. So, yeah. So Pauline used the word hypocrisy. I use the word schizophrenia. You know, there are arguments all over the shop. Okay.
And just for the sake of being transparent and giving everybody a voice, the archive has put in there, and I did see that that little short video from Gerard calling out the stunt and that. So if people want to check that out on Gerard Rennick's social medias, he's put something up about that as well. But just to be fair and transparent.
Okay. All right. So porting over from that to the next religious card. I'm a bit torn over this story, and I mentioned it at the start. So here we've got a student paramedic in Victoria who took Ambulance Victoria to court because his religious beliefs about hair, he's a Sikh, and as I understand it, Sikhs believe that they can't alter their bodies because their bodies are as their God made them. So they don't cut their hair and they don't shave their beards. Those are key religious tenets for Sikhs. So he then had a problem because the potential employer, Ambulance Victoria, had mask mandates for certain things, and you do in health. Now, leaving aside the fact that masks don't bloody work and if anything make things worse, even in surgery, and I've discussed that in the past, to believe it or not, proper randomised controls trials have shown that wound infection rates go up if surgeons wear masks in operating theatres. We've known that since the 1980s. And yet it's a religious ritual amongst healthcare workers. And again, most people would never even have heard of the evidence. They just know that you got to do it. So
I thought it was more around dropping, drooling or something like that in the patient. If you've got an open wound, it's not so much about that. It's about drooling or something like that out of your mouth or something in a mask or something. I don't know.
Look, whilst you're right, that is the intent. We've got randomised control studies that show it doesn't work. It makes it worse. Now, I don't know what the mechanism is. You can speculate. It might be that you breathing in and out through a piece of paper for half an hour results in the accumulation of droplets in it, which then extrude out the other side and can drop because they're bigger. Whereas prior to that, if you are unmasked, maybe the droplets don't accumulate. They're smaller in size. They float away. Doesn't matter what the mechanism is. We have proper randomised trials that show that it not only doesn't work, it doubles wound infection rates.
Interesting. Yep.
Anyway, this Sikh ran afoul of Ambulance Victoria because he couldn't comply with their mask wearing criteria because of his religious beliefs. So what he did about that was he offered Ambulance Victoria an alternative. He said, okay, here is a method of masking which has been acknowledged to be used in other healthcare sectors. And poor old Mark dropped off there for a second, but we've carried on. So this student offered a option to Ambulance Victoria. Okay, I can't meet your masking rules because of the beard, but in my community, we do this. And you can see in the picture there, it's like a double wrapping technique, and it's an acknowledged technique for getting around this problem. Now, I'm in two minds about this because ultimately this student took Ambulance Victoria to court and argued on religious grounds that he was being discriminated against. And the reason I'm uncomfortable with that is standards are standards. If you can genuinely show that he is an increased risk to patients because of his religious beliefs, then he's not worthy, he's not fit to do that job. It's a bit like a blind person is not fit to pilot an aircraft. It's not discrimination. They just they can't comply with the job. So I would rather have seen some sort of performance criteria rather than him saying, well, you're discriminating against me, and the court agreeing. And if so, why is religion, culture, or medical, why are they the only approved exemptions? Circles back to our, doctors issuing exemptions. Why are his genuinely held religious beliefs that he can't mask in the appropriate way? Why is that considered valid by a court, but not me saying, well, I just don't want to do it? That's my sincerely held. Do you see what I'm saying? It's A, I'm happy that he pushed back and won, and B, I'm concerned that the criteria for him doing so don't address the problem, which is this effective? Is his alternative effective? And we see same, like, as I understand it, Sikhs don't have to wear motorcycle helmets because they can't. Now, okay, well, why can't I just say, well, I can't do it either because I don't want to? And in both cases, the person at risk is me.
That's right.
It doesn't matter whether my objection is religious or something totally personal. Why is it that only some exemptions are allowed? So I'm uncomfortable about this whole thing.
Yeah, it's a bit interesting.
I've said that I think if we're going to do this, we should have a performance criterion. So, okay, if the student can argue that, okay, I can show you a masking method that is as effective as what you're doing, then I agree, there's no reason not to allow that. But that, of course, should cut both ways. So if he's required to demonstrate that his alternative method is similar, then surely Ambulance Victoria should be required to also demonstrate that their masking method is effective, safe and effective, preferably. And this would be a great time to show Ted Noel again. You might remember.
Well, he's getting another run again, is he? Yep.
For people who haven't seen Ted Noel, let's have a look at Ted Noel. This is where you say don't knock yourself off.
Oh, you just got rid of. Hang on, you just got rid of something, did you? You just. Oh, there he is.
So without further ado, let's cut to the chase and take a look at an ordinary surgical mask, and I'm using a vape. As you can see, that vape, which has aerosols the same size as COVID-19 or larger, goes through and around a surgical mask. Now, if we take a cup mask and have a good look at it, here we go. Notice it goes right through the mask easily and goes in every direction. The aerosol is not affected by the mask in any material. Now we look at a surgical mask with a foam strip to protect above and keep my glasses from fogging. Lo and behold, the aerosols go all around it. Has no effect on me spreading aerosols to you. Now a cloth mask I borrowed from my wife. Once again, here we go. Boom, straight through and around. It has no effect on the spread of aerosols. They go everywhere. And then I went and bought a guard mask with a high efficiency filter material. That one, here we go. Watch for it. Through and around. It had no effect on the vape aerosol, which, remember, is the same size or larger. Now, I don't have an N95 mask. I have these shop respirators where they can put all kinds of things in them, but they're like an N95 because when you breathe out, everything goes out through a valve. Guess what? It might protect me from you. It sure isn't going to protect you from me. Let's look at that again. Boom. Any mask with a button on it has a valve that lets everything go from you to your neighbor. It has no effect on anything. I think you can get the picture now. There is absolutely nothing that any of these masks do to protect you from me. And the fact is that unless I have a mask which is fully sealed and where I breathe through the filter material both directions, and I have a really high quality filter.
So a beautiful example, and that was from way back in the COVID era. And that demonstrated the uselessness of most forms of medical masks for COVID. And I say again, if Ambulance Victoria says, no, you have to use our method, and he says, well, I could come up with one that's equally effective, I think Ambulance Victoria needs to see this. And of course, most medical doctors have no idea this. This was an anesthesiologist. Why was it that the anaesthetists were the only one who saw through all this bullshit at the start? Demonstrating in a beautiful way that all the masks, remember the things that they smash car windows and drag people out because they weren't wearing masks alone in their cars, etc., etc. None of them worked. The only way a mask is going to work is, as Ted said, if it filters in both directions. And those masks are expensive, hard to wear. They increase your work of breathing, and you can't do it for any length of time. Think the sort of things that firefighters wear: breathing apparatus, closed hoods, seals, positive pressure. Doesn't work. So again, if I'm uncomfortable with the idea of you getting a religious exemption to following guidelines, but I'm also aware that a lot of the guidelines were based on belief rather than science, and in many cases were demonstrably ineffective as well.
Yep.
So there's another good old Ted. So we'll port from Ted over into the Govern Me Harder section, and this is from Victoria, the home of Governing Me Harder. Now, we've previously noted there are severe pressures in the housing market in Australia for a number of reasons, massive immigration being one of them, such that anytime you want to rent a flat, you might be in a queue with 50 or 100 other people just to inspect it. You don't get shown through by a landlord and say, yep, I'll take it. You're in a huge queue. So there's a huge unmet need for housing in Australia for a variety of reasons. And the Allen government here in Victoria has introduced measures to fix this. And here's what they're going to do. They're going to do, agents and landlords are no longer allowed to accept offers above the advertised rent. So in other words, of the 100 people who inspected that place, the person who says $400, I'll give you $450, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. So what that's called is price controls. So the Allen government's proposing to fix a supply shortage with price controls. And the other thing they're going to do from the other side, landlords cannot remove a tenant at the end of the lease unless they have a valid reason. Well, who says what a valid reason is? I'm the landlord. It's my flat. If my reason is your lease is up, buy, who's to say? I own the place, don't I? And then they list some valid reasons. They want to sell the property. They want to complete major works. They need the home for themselves or a family member. So they think they can improve the supply of rental housing by putting price controls and limitations on landlords investing. And this is what that's going to do. That's going to tighten the supply more. because there's going to be some landlords who say, oh, bugger this, I'm just not doing it anymore. Yeah, you had that rule in, I'm just not going to be a landlord anymore. And they might sell a house, so it's no longer a rental property. And the person who buys it might want to live in it. So again, that's removed from the rental pool. Or they might, have plans to build 5 rental flats. And then they go, no, I'm just not going to build them. I don't want to be a landlord anymore. So these government attempts to intervene in the free market to solve a problem which they created, shortage of housing, are only going to exacerbate that. And history is amply clear on that.
Yeah, 100%. I think South Australian Greens are talking about the same sort of concept as part of their policies with that. I think we've already got something in place where we can't increase rents within a 12-month period. So you sign a lease, and then if in 12 months' time they can bump it up whatever they want. But I think the South Australian Greens are talking about putting in place what Victoria's doing there.
I think there's a limit on how much you're allowed to increase the rent, even if you do roll over the lease at the end of it, which again is controls. It's price controls, like the old Soviet Union. Bread is 1 ruble, but there's no bread.
Yeah, and we saw the same thing happen, and we've seen now the proofs in the pudding, where the government got involved in the 5% or 2.5% deposit scheme. It's bloody pushed up. It's massively pushed up house prices, and now at least $100,000 in some cases by putting this thing in.
No one could have predicted this, Mark.
No one could have predicted it.
Miscellaneous. So what we've got here is a little space weather update. And for people who haven't seen previous shows, space weather is streams of radiation and particles which come off the sun and impact the Earth and influence it. And we've seen evidence in recent years that space weather is getting stormier. That's why we're getting those auroras and much lower latitudes than normal. And here's another example. So during the week, there was an incident involving an Airbus aircraft which suddenly dived multiple thousands of feet because of a glitch in its flight control software. And apparently this was caused by an interaction between solar radiation and the flight control systems of the Airbus. And this involved thousands of aircraft, including in Australia. So there were massive disruptions several days this week with Jetstar grounding multiple flights because they operate a lot of Airbus A320s until the software could be rewritten to deal with that. Now, a reminder, just in passing, because we've discussed the possible implications from this lately, and I refer you back to this Brett Weinstein podcast with Ben Davidson, where Ben Davidson argued, plausibly I thought, that the reason we're seeing more of these space weather events affecting the Earth is not because the sun's getting angrier, but because the protective magnetic shield around the Earth is declining. And if the latter is true, if the magnetic field is declining, that is a potentially catastrophic fact for Earth, because that means that more of these events and more severe events will happen in future. So I'm not going to say too much about it here, except if you're interested in knowing more about it, search for this Brett Weinstein podcast. I would put it as one of my top 5 thought-provoking podcasts of all time. And if you want to find it, just search for the terms I've got there. Dark Horse Podcast, Ben Davidson, Space Weather. If you didn't see that last time and you want to have a look at it. Now, again, as has become my want recently, I wanted to check whether Ben Davidson was credible in what he was saying. So I asked the AI about him as well. So I asked them, is Ben Davidson, are his views credible with regard to space weather? And here's what the AI has said. So they've said that he runs a pseudoscience YouTube, that he has no formal scientific training, and that he's been repeatedly debunked by climate scientists and other experts. So again, for students of the art of the argument, their preamble to answering my question is to use an ad hominem. So they've attacked him by way of attacking his YouTube channel. They said it's pseudoscience, whatever that is. They've used an inverse appeal to authority. They've said, well, we can't listen to this guy because he's got no formal scientific training. So the appeal to authority is usually trust the experts. And the inverse of it is, well, don't trust people who aren't trained. So they started with an ad hominem. They quickly threw in the inverse appeal to authority. They then said that his ideas have been repeatedly debunked. So to say that something's been repeatedly debunked, we've told you again and again and again, everybody knows this is wrong. That's a false argument called an appeal to consensus. We've told you many times. Okay, the consensus is. And finally, they've also used the appeal to authority because they've said he's been debunked by experts, climate scientists and other experts. So isn't it interesting once you know how arguments work and what false arguments are, and also having tested AI a few times, yet again, I've actually looked at a 2-hour podcast of this guy and more and come away thinking that's worthy of more thought. And yet the AIs have just used all these false arguments to tell me not to bother.
Yeah. Yep. Data in, data out. That's what it is. It's been programmed. Large language models are just programmed. It's data in, data out, and it's programmed from, the uncensored part of the internet, isn't it?
Yep. And look, it's just hoovering up the approved narrative. That's obvious.
And we have spoken about that too. Nick said about the poll swapping. Now, we did discuss that in one of our episodes, quite a few episodes ago, about that concept, and we went into that a bit.
Yep. And Nick, that's definitely worth having a look at, because if that's what's really happening, that's an extinction level event for most of the people on Earth, because it's far more than just that. It's the end of the electrical era on Earth. It's the burning out of every electronic device, all the transformers, etc., 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 and having to restart from the Stone Age. So interesting, very interesting. And
even for those billionaires that are building those massive bunkers as well.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of weather, last week we discussed my dissatisfaction with the new Bureau of Meteorology site, and it's still garbage. I want to click one link and get my local radar like I used to. I don't want to either get a blank page or a map of Australia that I've then got to, channel into every bloody time. Get it right. I'm a farmer, and I agree with these farmers. I don't want your fancy $100 million upgrade. I just want a weather radar that works. Okay.
Yep. And if anybody wants to check it out, I've only just written a Substack about the bomb debacle, so that's on the Substack.
Back to Ted.
There.
Ted Steele.
Gone full circle, haven't we, mate?
Good on you, Ted Steele. And last week we mentioned him, and we mentioned his belief that the panspermia theory is possible. That is, that DNA can travel in space between planets, and that is a way that life can travel between planets. A theory for which obviously he's been fact-checked by the Googles, but he's mentioned that in the past. And a bit of support for that this week with this story, which said that experimentally they put mold spores on the outside of the International Space Station and left them there exposed to, I think it's very cold temperatures, space radiation, the thing Ben Davison talks about, and vacuum for 9 months. And when they then brought those samples back to Earth, 80% of them were viable. Now, a spore is much more complicated than a piece of DNA. It's an actual living thing. But the fact that it can survive 9 months in the vacuum of space, bombarded by solar radiation, and survive it, I think introduces significant support for Ted Steele's ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, I find it very interesting when I talk to Ted about those sorts of things, and and when you think about the amount of space rocks that actually do make it through the atmosphere, because people claim, oh, nothing can survive burning up through the atmosphere. Look how much stuff actually does make it through, and then ends up in the upper atmosphere and so forth.
Yep. Okay. Now, as I've learnt to do, I did a bit of Googling on the old Ted as well. And I pretty soon came up with this. So in the Wikipedia for Ted Steele, it says that in January 2001, he made allegations to the media in regard to soft marking, resulting in the upgrading of full fee-paying international students. He was summarily dismissed by UOW, I guess that's University of Western Australia, Vice-Chancellor, stating that the university's reputation was placed at a serious and imminent risk. Okay, well, they didn't say whether it was true or not. They only said that the revealing of this placed the reputation of the university at risk. Now, I can tell you that I've got personal evidence from my son that this is very much the case. And he used to complain bitterly to me when he was an engineering student that his prac groups were stuffed full of Chinese students who could barely speak English. And these group pracs would be done largely by him, and then the marks would be shared amongst the students, including the Chinese students who didn't even understand what they're talking about. So, yeah, I think this is a plausible claim as well. And again, you'll notice here that he wasn't dismissed for saying something untrue. It's merely said that he placed the reputation of the university at risk. And I think it was RFK Jr. that said they'll forgive you for being wrong, but they won't forgive you for being right.
That's right. And Ted did talk about that, because he talked, even him and Judy Wileman and both were attacked by Wikipedia and locked out of Wikipedia for changing stuff, and they've had massive hit pieces. Judy in particular, Judy Wileman, massively attacked on in Wikipedia.
Yep. So that's just what you get. You know, if you're a threat to the host, then the immune system of the host will attack you. Now, what else was in his bio there? It said that regarding COVID in 2020, Steele, along with researcher N. Chandra Wickramasinghe, claimed in 10 research papers that COVID-19 originated from a meteor spotted as a bright fireball over the city of Songwan in northeastern China, and that a fragment had landed in the Wuhan area. So he's talking about the panspermia thing. He's saying, okay, well, maybe the virus seeded into Wuhan because it came interplanetary. And that sounds crazy only because we've never heard of it before and we haven't seen the evidence for it. So again, I did a bit of Googling on that. And did you know that throughout history, comets have often been regarded as portents of doom, including plague and infectious diseases? So it happened enough time in the past that people not only noticed the connection, but actually recorded it. So
interesting.
It's not impossible. It's not impossible.
No, that's right. And one of the things that you talked about through one of the interviews is the cruise ship in the middle of the ocean that had no issues. It's like how was explain that? So that's really interesting. And again, there's only a portion of them as well that got sick, and others didn't. It's just so much that we don't know. But they try to gaslight and other terms and that for it as well.
Yep. And more to that, I might leave it for another time, but you've reminded me of a new segment. So you've used the term gaslighting there, and we've discussed in the past where gaslighting as a term comes from. And I've got a few others that I'm going to do in the future. So, to have someone over a barrel is one of them. And I think you used the term stonewall a couple of weeks ago. So that's something I might just
And muddying the well is another one that they used a lot in the last 5 years as well. Muddying the well, muddying the water. Yep.
Muddying the waters.
Astroturfing is another one, Bruce, that I wasn't aware of
Yes.
before. Astroturfing is another interesting.
As opposed to astrobiology, which is what Ted's on about.
Yep.
All right, zombie stories. Here's this week's episode of Women Are Being Unfairly Dealt With in This Job. With this story telling us that, shock horror, only 1/3 of advanced maths students are female or gender confused. So the story said, in New South Wales, for example, only 1/3 of high school graduates who complete mathematics at the highest level are female or gender diverse. Now, I wasn't aware that was a problem, but apparently it is a problem, and it's so much a problem that the University of Sydney has actually got a program for dealing with this 2-to-1 gender imbalance, including specific invitations to female or uncertain gender students, and a mentoring program to get more of them into this terribly male-dominated sphere. So the University of Sydney regards a 2-to-1 gender imbalance as a problem that needs to be fixed. Except they don't. Because on a hunch, I just did a bit of checking as well, and I asked, what proportion of Sydney University nursing students are female? And I didn't get a precise answer, not specific to the Sydney Uni, but the answer was that overall around 90% of nursing graduates are female, and it is likely that this is consistent. So it's likely that Sydney U's got a nearly 10-to-1 gender imbalance for nursing. And remember, a 2-to-1 imbalance is a problem that needs to be fixed with special invitations and mentoring. And it's pretty similar in teaching as well, because I did get figures from Sydney Uni there, and they said that 75% of their teaching degrees go to women. So I'm not sure, but it's clear that Sydney Uni needs a special program of invitations and mentoring for males that want to do either teaching or nursing. That's pretty clear by their own standards.
Yeah. Funny about that, how they want to keep bringing that up all the time.
I hardly dare put Jason's.
No, I already put it up.
Did you?
Yeah, I already put it up. Jason's always got the clangers. Good on you, Jason. I'll bring it up here. I flashed it up for a little bit.
I think it was, when a bat and a pangolin love each other very much. I think that's what that was about.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, myth-busting segment, and it's not quite myth-busting, but it leads on to another story, which is a sort of this doesn't add up story. So it's going to lead to that. And here's the story that triggered this. So this was the Hong Kong tower block fire during the week. So we had this set of actually 7 high-rise residential apartments in Hong Kong, which caught fire, and the whole lot of them burned out over a period of 40 hours, killing, by latest count, well over 100 people, maybe more.
Wow, tragic.
So massive high-rise fire. But here's what's notable. So they took 40 hours to burn out and put out those fires. But none of those 7 buildings collapsed, despite burning for 40 hours. So the question is, why didn't they collapse after being gutted by fire? And the answer is because they're engineered not to. So modern high-rise buildings are specifically engineered to not collapse, even if they burn out completely like this in a fire. They burn out, but they stay standing. And there's been at least 100 examples of this, of high-rise fires around the world. And I'll just show you several of them. So we had the Grenfell fire in Britain, which also caused a large number of casualties and burned out almost the entire building, as you can see. But after the fire went out, it was still standing. We had this one on the left in Shanghai, which consumed the entire building without collapsing it. And we had this one on the right in South Korea, which burnt the top half of the building out, again, without collapsing it. So like I say, there's been more than 100 of these massive steel frame skyscraper fires, none of which have ever collapsed due to fire. And in fact, believe it or not, there's only been one day in Earth's history where any steel framed fire protected building has collapsed due to fire. So notice I used two words there. So steel framed means the structure of the building is steel, the load bearing structure, rather than brick or concrete. And I said fire protected. And there's a standard for that. And for most high-rise buildings, they have a 2 or a 3 hour fire protection standard. And what it says is that in an office fire, so if all the things in that office building catch fire and burn out, so the carpets, the chairs, the cabinetry, etc., this building has to be capable of withstanding that level of fire intensity for 2 or 3 hours. Depends which bit of the structure. Okay. So that's what fire protected means. And the way they do that is the steel beams are either they have a spray on fire retardant which insulates them from heat, or often they use actually basically gyprock. They have like 2-inch thick chalkboard surrounding the important things. And I used to have a fire resistant gun safe, and that's exactly what's in. It's got basically gyprock on the inside of it as a thermal protection. So like I said, despite there being 100 or more high-rise fire-protected buildings burn out, none of them ever collapsed except in one incident, and that was on 9/11, when in fact not only 2 did, but 3 did. So the 2 World Trade Center buildings, World Trade Center 1 and 2, which were struck by jet aircraft, they both collapsed. But not many people know that there was actually a 3rd massive building affected on the day, and it also collapsed. And that was what was called World Trade Center 7. And amazingly, very few people have even heard of World Trade Center 7, because World Trade Center 7 was a 47-story skyscraper on the same campus as the Twin Towers. And it also caught fire in the attacks, but it was not struck by either aircraft. So it got some physical damage from bits of Towers 1 and 2 dropping on it. It had some what they call office fires started, but it wasn't hit by aircraft. It was not filled up by jet fuel. And to be honest, it doesn't matter whether a plane full of jet fuel hits the building or not, because jet fuel, again, burns at about 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. And to weaken the steel, you need like 3000 degrees. So even if Building 7 had been doused in kerosene, it wouldn't have mattered. It can't burn hot enough regardless. Nevertheless, let's have a look at what happened to it. Okay,
you got it primed up?
I think so. Let's see, what have we got here? I think it's that one. Yep. This is what happened.
It looks awfully lot like a controlled demolition, doesn't it, Bruce?
So after World Trade Center 7 had been burning for 6 or 7 hours, and modest, this wasn't the entire building covered in flame like you've seen in some of those overseas fires. This was a few what they call office fires. There were a few isolated bits of isolated offices that were burning. It wasn't an immense conflagration, and it couldn't be, because the fire standard says that an ordinary office fire, so all the wood, paper, paneling, carpet that you find in an ordinary office, will burn out in about 20 or 30 minutes. which is why these buildings are engineered for 2 or 3 hours of exposure. And even if they weren't engineered for that, you need 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to weaken the steel structure, whereas ordinary wood paper materials burn at less than 1,000. So it's actually not relevant. And even jet fuel burns at maybe 1,200, maybe 1,500 Fahrenheit. So in neither case is there enough heat to weaken the steel and cause it to collapse, let alone to cause it to collapse 7 hours later when there's just a few little smouldering fires going on. So anybody who watched that went, this doesn't add up. But of course, most people were not shown it. Okay. And again, good old friend Brett Weinstein has again done a podcast on this just recently. And he's interviewed this chap. So this chap is Richard Gage. He is the head of an organisation called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And that is 3,000 architects and structural engineers who've all said, this is BS. Office fires did not bring Building 7 down. Something else happened. And if you want to have a look at that podcast, again, there's what you can search for. Brett Weinstein, Building 7 did not kill itself. That's rather nice. And here's some of the arguments that group has made. Structural engineers saying, no, the ordinary office fires don't collapse an entire building. So they've said the steel needs to reach 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to soften, and office fires are less than 1,200. This building was not struck by either aircraft and not impacted with jet fuel. And even if it was, jet fuel only burns at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, would need to be 3,000 to weaken it. And any of us who've thrown a cup of petrol or a cup of diesel on a fire knows how quickly that goes. If you throw a cup of diesel on a fire you're trying to start, it goes woof, flares up, and 30 seconds later, the intensity's gone down to almost nothing. So it burns extremely quickly. So even if this building had been showered in jet fuel, which ignited, there was none of it left hours and hours later. So that makes sense. And buildings are designed to survive ordinary office fires. How do we know that? Because none of them have ever collapsed, apart from the 3 that collapsed all on the same day. Third point, they said, Building 7 collapsed symmetrically into its own footprint, just like a demolition. So you cannot argue here that one or other of the small fires that was burning burned out or softened one of the steel beams and let it drop off. And remember, buildings like this have got hundreds of steel supports going in both directions. So even if you believe that the fires were hot enough to melt the steel somewhere, and remember the whole building's not burning, it's just the odd bit, so that there was a localized failure, that doesn't bring the building down. And it certainly doesn't bring it all down like an elevator. They say the only way you can bring the building all down like an elevator is to take out all of the support columns simultaneously on multiple levels, which is what a controlled demolition does. They spend weeks putting explosives in all the columns and then they blow them all at once. So they noticed that it's a symmetrical collapse into its own footprint. It's not sagging on one side or falling over because somewhere localized is damaged. They said that they'd actually shown this video to multiple demolition engineers without telling them what it was. They said, what is your opinion of this bit of video? And remember, very few people have seen the pictures of World Trade Center 7 coming down because there's been very little interest in anybody showing it. So they showed a number of demolition experts. What do you think's happening here? And every single one of them said, well, that's a controlled death. The only way you collapse a building in its own footprint like that is, it was a controlled demolition. And finally, and I think this is telling, and this reminds me of my trial in Canberra. Okay, so the story we're told is that World Trade Center 7, which just had ordinary office fires, was not seriously structurally damaged, and yet collapsed into its own footprint 7 hours later, despite being engineered to not do that. It did not then spark a whole raft of reviews and changes because, oh my God, this building's engineered not to fall down when there's an office fire, and yet it did. What went wrong? Are other buildings at risk, etc., etc.? No, they just said, oh, well, that's what happened, despite the fact it's never happened anywhere else in the world. They didn't feel any need to go, oh, it's like, what did they do with the McDonnell Douglas aircraft when it dropped an engine off and crashed? They grounded the rest of them to examine them to see if they're at risk as well. This engineer said there have been no significant changes to the fire protection code since then. So the reason they didn't ask themselves, what the hell, why did this building collapse when it's not supposed to? They didn't bother doing it because they know why it collapsed. They're not worried about it again because they know why it happened this time. Okay? And that reminds me, like I say, when I was arrested in Canberra, one of the big things at my trial, where the AFP claimed that, I was acting in a very dangerous manner and using my vehicle as a weapon and so forth, the lawyer said, yeah, well, if that's true, how come you left him sitting in the car in possession of the keys afterwards?
That's right.
What was your subsequent, what you did after that shows what you thought. And same here. What they did after the unexpected collapse of this building in ordinary circumstances, what do they do afterwards? Nothing.
Yep.
So and I agree, that's pretty smelly.
Oh, definitely smelly, man. Never passed the pub test in my eyes. And again, I'd never really been, a massive conspiracist and that, but that whole thing, 9/11, the whole lot, even the Diana thing, Princess Diana, that stuff, it's just, there's a reason why things like this happen.
And that's right. And as they say, once you work out they're lying about one thing, you work out they're lying about everything.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And the biggest thing perhaps is this building just dropped as if it was a controlled demolition. Buildings which fail due to structural failure, they often partially collapse. Some of them actually fall over. To drop into its own footprint can only happen if you suddenly remove all of the supports at multiple lower levels. And here's some pictures of what that looks like and compare them to what we saw. I think it's that one.
Here's a series of known controlled demolitions on the left. Building 7 on the right. Is there any similarity? Is there enough?
Oh, hello. You got the StreamYard link up. You get down there.
I've nuked myself. Let's start that again.
Let's bring that back on stage.
But when you pursue it, the opposite happens. You run into inexplicable anomaly after inexplicable anomaly.
Yeah, well, using logic, let's use some. Here's a series of known controlled demolitions on the left. Building 7 on the right. Is there any similarity? Is there enough similarity to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives? Especially since fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, has never in history brought down a steel frame fire-protected structure. Ever. It should have been the first hypothesis that NIST considered. But no, they never seriously considered it and only really addressed it years later in their very frequently asked questions from the public. So we have to ask ourselves, Brett, does it have any of the features of controlled demolition?
100% it does. And good on them for the work. Yep. Doesn't suit the narrative though, does it, Bruce?
So the story we're told is that this was a collapse caused by fires. The fires could not have been hot enough. They would had to have been universal throughout the building. They had to have gone on for much longer. None of those things are even possible. And the pictures are clearly a controlled demolition. So you and I don't know what happened, but we do know that the official explanation does not add up. And if you want to watch that podcast, they talk about the Twin Towers too, and they make exactly the same point. There was not enough structural damage to either building to cause the structures to fail. And the fires, which were modest, were not going to be hot enough or gone on long enough to cause them to fail either. Because remember, these are 2 or 3 hours fire rated. The first tower fell at 1 hour 40. Even if the fire had been hot enough, and it can't be, jet fuel and office furnishings cannot be hot enough. And even if it had gone on for long enough, and it can't, we've seen what happens with you throw a cup of diesel on a fire, it's gone. And we saw how intense the fires were in the buildings. Nothing like the fires in other buildings. So watch the podcast. It's not just building 7 that smells, it's the other 2 buildings that smell as well. You know, the Twin Towers dropping into their footprint like that. Just
stinks to high heaven, mate. Stinks to high heaven.
Something doesn't add up. Now, to finish, and again for our grockophiles, a key claim here, which was made by the expert there, was that there have only ever been 3 what he called fire-protected steel-framed buildings collapse ever due to fire in world history, before and since then, and they all happened within a few hours on the same day in the same place. So that's a key finding, because if other buildings around the world have collapsed similarly, then that's a weakness in the argument, isn't it? So I asked the AIs. So here's what I said into the AIs. Is it true that there have only ever been 3 steel frame fire protected high-rise buildings collapsed due to fire, all on 9/11? And the AIs said it is not true. It is not true that only 3 steel-framed high-rise buildings have ever collapsed due to fire, all on 9/11. There have been other instances of steel-framed high-rises collapsing due to fire, although they remain rare events. Now, first off, notice it hasn't answered my question.
Yep.
They asked about steel-framed fire-protected buildings. And that fire-protected has a specific meaning. That means it's engineered for that 2 or 3 hour office fire protection. And the way they do that is by cladding the structural steel in spray-on fire material, which is inches thick, or basically chipboard. So it didn't answer my question. It said, yes, other buildings have collapsed, and it listed 2 other buildings. Okay. But I noticed it didn't answer my question. So I went back and it said, I asked if there had been any other steel-framed and fire-protected buildings collapsed due to fire. You listed 2 others, but didn't say they were fire-protected. Were they fire-protected to the same standard as the 3 World Trade Center buildings? So it then came back and again listed the buildings. The Plasco building and the Wilton building were not fire-protected to a standard comparable to the World Trade Center buildings. In fact, reports indicate they had little to no effective fire protection in place, which contributed to their rapid collapse. So what it told me is not true. And when you look further into it, not only were they not equivalently protected, and like I say, that means something. That means 2 to 3 hours withstanding office fire temperatures. So when I looked it up, so one wasn't built to standard and the other wasn't steel framed. It was a concrete framed building. So the AI has, again, got it wrong. And yet most people just fact check it. They get to the first page and say, is it true that those 3 buildings are the only ones who ever dropped? And the AI would say no, and they go, oh, it's bullshit.
Yeah, there you go. Bloody conspiracy theorists. Those bloody, those bloody people think they bloody know better than AI and who programs them. Jeez.
Anyway, AI and I have got quite a thing going at the moment. So I went back to it. I said, so to re-ask my question, aside from the 3 World Trade Center buildings which collapsed on 9/11, have any other steel-framed fire-protected buildings collapsed anywhere else in the world due to fire? And here's what it said. As far as engineering consensus and official reports indicate, the 3 World Trade Center buildings that collapsed on 9/11 are the only cases of fire-protected, steel-framed high-rises to have ever suffered a total collapse due to fire. Okay, so yes, I was right, despite it having, in 2 rounds, won't say it lied to me, but it got it wrong twice. And I had to specifically go back, and we saw this last week. We had to keep going back to it, and it kept apologising.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Now, finally, to check whether AI learned, because remember, these are learning models, right? I waited a day and then I asked it exactly the same question. And that's what I got here. So apart from the 3 World Trade Center buildings, have any other steel framed, fire protected high-rise buildings ever collapsed due to fire? And gave me yesterday's answer. Yes, other steel frame high-rise buildings have totally collapsed due to fire, and it listed the same buildings again. So this is a salutary lesson to those of us who think that fact check by Google or fact check by the AIs has any value. Week after week, we just show that it doesn't. And sure, Dan might come in and say, "Oh, Grok would have got that right." Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what brand it is. I'm saying we have multiple instances where, the all-seeing, all-knowing AI just doesn't know. It's wrong.
Yep. And the massive concern with that is obviously the amount of control, because Alphabet, which is a massive billion dollar organization which controls Google and the search algorithms and YouTube and everything that people get to see, have way too much control over what narrative is shaped. And we obviously heard Melissa Fleming in regards to climate change saying that they've worked and partnered with Google so people don't talk about anything else than like climate change apart from the United Nations narrative that's been shaped.
All right, and I'm going to end on that, but I'll just put this slide back up. So if you want to have a look at the Brett Weinstein podcast, and he really does pull out some detailed analyses of controversial subjects. That's how you find it. Brett Weinstein, Building 7 Did Not Kill Itself, will bring up his latest podcast on that.
Yep. Bloody good stuff. He really goes the deep dive, doesn't he? Yeah. Oh, look at you go. Hey, we just bloody cracked over 2.5 hours. We're
back to normal.
Back to normal. And I did want to show something at the beginning of the show because I watched something on the weekend which was really powerful, and I want to share. It's not Australian centered, but it's kind of American based, this documentary. But it was truly powerful. Really got me, because obviously it involves child protection. But I want to just share this quickly so people can see, and I recommend people watch this and make some time for this. This is a documentary put together by Ryan Matter, and it's called Never in America, Unmasking Child Protection Services Kidnapping Empire. And he claims in there that's only possible in America for certain reasons, but I think this is a global issue. But I'm just going to read this quickly. What if the very agency sworn to protect America's most vulnerable children became the largest legally protected kidnapping network in the country? For decades, Child Protective Services was sold to the public as a shield for abused and neglected kids. Today, it operates like a ruthless, quota-driven machine, incentivized by federal funding under the Adoption and Safe Families Act, empowered by near unlimited authority, and shielded by secrecy and immunity. Good intentions still exist in the pocket, but those pockets have become the perfect camouflage for a system that now destroys far more families than it saves. And look, if people have the time, I highly recommend it. It is a tough watch, but I recommend if you can watch it. Definitely, it's a real eye opener. So I was pretty blown away. But so I thought if you had time to watch that. But thank you, sir, very much.
Didn't we just see that in Italy, where the state authorities have come in and seized 3 children because their parents were raising them sort of naturally in the bush? Yeah.
Well, it's happening all over the place, right? It's happening all over the place where these so-called departments are weaponized against families. But over there, it's terrible. It's a racketeering. That's right. People see children as a commodity, and this is the terrifying thing. We talk about some pretty tough stuff here on our show. We highlight stuff, but this attack on children all around the world, Bruce, is mind blowing, and I just wish more people would be aware. And I know, but a lot of people don't want to go near it because it affects people so much, because it hits close to home. Because a lot of people have got kids and grandkids and families, and are genuinely good people. So when you know stuff like this is going on with kids, it's bloody crazy stuff.
Yep, and adults are a commodity too. We're being farmed by the state. Just the same.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly right. All of humanity is being farmed by a massive agenda, and we'll keep calling it out because this goes much higher than our politicians, our bureaucrats. It goes way higher, and we've just got to keep being aware, alert and awake, and we go from there.
Control your food, control your mobility, control your fertility. I mean, what's the difference between us and sheep or cattle?
Yep, exactly right. And yes, James Corbett is very good. There's so much that comes through. He's been talking into a lot of stuff as well for a long time. He's a good follow as well. Yep, James Corbett, the Corbett Report. Yep, human resources. Righto, legends. Let's get this show finished up for the Monday. And good on you, 2.5 hours. We cracked along well, but good on you, legends. Have a great night. Good on you, Bruce, for bringing everything again. Excellent. Hope everybody enjoyed it, and see you all again next week.
Cheers then.
To fight again for that already burned, he was driven towards the flames. All the signs are there for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day, a song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.